Congressman, thanks for taking the time this afternoon.
Thanks for having me on, brother.
You've been deeply critical of past budget deals between Speaker Johnson, those deals involving Democrats as well. Will you vote for this agreement?
Probably not. This is just another deal. We kicked the can down the road. Congress really required to do one thing, and that's to pass a budget. In the last 30 years, we've said to the American public, we're in fact not going to do our job. And until we lock down this border, I don't see me and several others not voting for this thing because 10 million people, $400 billion a year. It's just the fentanyl, the whole deal. It's just too much.
You, of course, voted to oust Speaker McCarthy in part due to opposition to the deal he made with involving Democrats to pass a budget. Would you threaten Johnson's speakership as well if this goes through?
No, sir. He's been truthful to us. He didn't mock my religious beliefs. He didn't. We actually pretty much share religious beliefs, but he, and he didn't have, as you all called it, $50 million in side deals. He's been very open about what he's doing, and I find that, frankly, refreshing. The end result is not exactly what I'd like, but I think at least he understands where we're coming from, and he's not critical of it. And I understand his willingness to want to keep the government open, but the folks back in Tennessee, the number one issue is immigration, and we're not doing anything about it. Either party, you talk about the uniparty, and a lot of talk's been given to that, but that's the reality is that Republicans get in power, they don't do anything about it. Yeah. The National Chambers of Commerce want it to stay open, and Democrats get in power, the same thing. Everybody wants somebody on the roof that if they fall off, they can pay them a lot less, and they don't have to settle with them because they're afraid they're going to get deported. And that is the bottom line, and it's disgusting.
Well, there was a deal, as you know, in the Senate, a bipartisan deal, and I know it didn't give everybody everything, but it certainly raised the standards for asylum seekers. It added security at the border. Was it a mistake, do you think, to blow up that deal?
No, I don't. Everybody said Trump gave credit. I wish they'd have given me credit for it, honestly. It was a terrible deal. It didn't fix the border. It didn't lock it down. You had 4,999 people could come across the border. But when that 5,000th one comes over in one day, then everything goes into effect. And the reality is they weren't going to lock the border down. This is more bureaucracy, just another excuse to hire more bureaucrats, more lawyers. And what we need is people at the border. We need a wall. We need our military there. We need to get them out of all these other foreign wars that we're in and put them down and secure our border. That to me would be my priority.
I will say that James Lankford, Republican, he questioned the way that 5,000 figure's been described. But you do mention foreign wars. Of course, the hearings are underway. You told me just shortly ago you were at those hearings this morning. You're going to return regarding the withdrawal, the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. I wonder, would you have preferred if U.S. troops, at least some troops, had remained there?
No, I think it was time. It was a worthless situation. It was but the way we handled it was terrible. We left billions of dollars of things on the ground, and worse than that, 13 brave Americans lost their life. And a constituent of mine, Ryan Canals, was the last person who died in Afghanistan. And every day when I leave my house, I see the road named in his honor. And so I have a daily reminder of that in Knoxville. And I think it was just a complete capitulation. We showed America at its worst. We had a bunch of bureaucrats, and in that instance, for the rules of engagement that America has are bogus. We had a Marine sniper who had the suicide bomber in his sights more than once, was told to stand down, probably through the State Department. You have people who have never fired a shot in anger, telling military men and women. 13 brave Americans lost their lives. Dozens more were injured. Folks were killed. It just, innocent civilians lost their lives, and it's all because of bureaucracy. And we need some answers. And everybody's making it a partisan thing. Somebody wants to blame Biden. Somebody wants to blame Trump. I really don't care who gets blamed. I just want to make sure we never do make those same mistakes again. But I'm sort of in the minority. It's a partisan issue, as it always is. We're getting close to an election year, and it's pitiful. Well, Americans die. We ought to be able to all hold hands and say, hey,
Hmm.
we screwed up. Let's not ever do this dadgum thing again.
So let me ask you on that point. You say that Afghanistan, the withdrawal was a capitulation. You oppose additional funding to Ukraine. Why would leaving Ukraine weaker against an ongoing Russian invasion not be a capitulation as well?
Well, first of all, it's our money, $114 billion. You saw congressional members in both parties make a lot of money off of our missile defense system that we sent to Ukraine. And then all of a sudden, guess what? We had to buy a multi-billion-dollar no-bid contract. And congressmen on both sides of the aisle just happened to own stock in that company. And so the thing stunk from the beginning. I think we had to borrow the money in the first place. As you know, we're $35 trillion in debt. We bring in around a little less than 5 trillion, and we spend about 7 trillion every year, and we call that a success. And then with our Pentagon, they haven't passed an audit in the history of audits. They can't find $500 billion in assets. And how did we punish them the last time? We paid them 20 billion new dollars. Gave them 20 billion. The whole thing just stinks, top to bottom. We ought not have Americans anywhere near Ukraine or our dollars. They ought to be on our border, protecting our border. When Americans take an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States when they join our military to fight for this country, it has nothing to do with Ukraine.
But why
and Russia, Putin's a thug, and I would assume that he'd go away. But
he'd go away from
just not the case.
From Ukraine. I mean, the thing is, if it's fundamentally weak to withdraw, to capitulate, as you say, in Afghanistan, why wouldn't ceding the largest country in Europe, right, Ukraine, tens of millions of people who say they don't want to live under Russian power, why would conceding that to Russia show American strength? Wouldn't that show weakness?
We're not there in the first place. It's Europe. Why are we over there in the first place? It doesn't, to me, that doesn't make any sense. It's not conceding if we're not over there. Now we're over there, and we're putting more and more of our hard-earned dollars over there that we're having to borrow. Again, why don't we use the same thing for the Uyghurs that the Chinese have imprisoned, those poor Muslim folks that they've imprisoned, organ harvesting, slave labor, things like that for cheap American goods. And the reason, again, is your national chambers of commerce and the Uniparty are getting rich. They want those cheap products, and you can't pick and choose. It's either all or none. And I would say none. Just protect America. That needs to be our goal.
Well, you mentioned China. I went to Taiwan and spoke to military commanders, officials there, all of whom said China is watching and learning about the U.S. and the world about its response to Ukraine. Would abandoning Ukraine signal to China that, well, you know what, Taiwan is yours as well?
Well, I had breakfast with the former Secretary of State, and he told me that, in fact, that the Chinese know how many paper clips we use in the Longworth building, and Longworth happens to be the building I'm in. They're studying every move we make. They're studying our political expediency. They're every angle of this, and they do that in everything we do. I think they're also probably looking at just how weak our border is, and that's probably why we're seeing quite a few Chinese coming over our southern border now, unchecked, communist Chinese that would, in fact, if they do roll on Taiwan, I suspect they'll be up to no good if they're not already. So I think it's a multifaceted thing, but China studies everything we do. And we've, again, because of our greed in this country, both parties, brother, we've allowed them in every which way we can. And currently to this day, they're wreaking havoc, I feel like.